So I got a lot of requests to check out this show, and typically that means a lot of people like this show. I really hope that's not the case here. Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. This show is pretty bad. I mean, the writing was on the wall from the very beginning because this is a CW show. Listen, making fun of the CW is as common as drinking water. I'll defend it a little bit. There are some good shows here and there. I mean, those first 2 seasons of The Flash were great before it started looking like that. But will I die on this hill defending the CW? No. I mean, have you read their canceled live-action Powerpuff Girls script? Oh god, that's a 60-page horror story right there. But let's shift focus back to the subject at hand. 2-sentence horror stories. If you haven't heard of the show, you probably have heard of the concept. It's exactly what it sounds like. Horror stories comprised of only 2 sentences. Not necessarily a new concept by any means, but was popularized in 2013 with the 2-sentence horror story subreddit, a place where any user could submit their shortest, spine-chilling horror stories. And I do mean anyone. Yeah, if 2-sentence horror stories are synonymous with anything in this day and age, it's bad 2-sentence horror stories. Most infamously being this one right here. It almost feels like Christmas, except I've got no eggnog. Thankfully, I can just milk some for my creature.
Who the fuck is this creature? And why are we milking them?
To this day, nobody really even knows. But even in this admittedly bad example, you can sort of already see the story structure. The first sentence is seemingly mundane and normal, while the second sentence reveals the horrific truth, oftentimes recontextualizing the first sentence and its meaning entirely. The show does the exact same thing. Every episode opens with the first sentence and closes out the episode with the second one. Whether or not that ties into the episode at all is kind of debatable. But those stories are a legitimately fun and quick read, so basing a show off of that concept actually sounds like a pretty good idea. For like 5 seconds. Because then you start to realize that, hey, maybe making a 20-minute episode off of 2 sentences kinda defeats the purpose of 2-sentence horror stories. No? Listen, I love peanut M&Ms, but if somebody came to me with a peanut M&M the size of a desk, I'm not gonna enjoy myself. I didn't say I wouldn't eat it though. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. How did this show come to be? Well, in 2017, this series was pitched to and greenlit by Warner Brothers subsidiary company Stage 13. 5 episodes were made on a low budget and was distributed as a digital series through the streaming service Go90. You guys remember Go90? Yeah. Nobody does. That's why it went defunct in 2018. The company going under led this show to move to the CW, where it ran for 3 seasons, spanning from 2019 to 2022. Critical reception was never the best, and viewership was in a similar boat. This show probably limped along for as long as it could due to its low budget, which, to be honest, is really only noticeable in season 1, but I'll go over that more in the ranking itself. Which brings me to my final point. What exactly am I ranking? Well, the 5 episodes from the digital series will not be a part of this list. It's not part of the show's catalog, so it's not going to be a part of this ranking. If there's enough fan outcry, I will definitely talk about all 5 episodes in a standalone video at some point. So that leaves us with 3 seasons and a total of 29 episodes to rank. Except I will not be ranking the season 1 episode trilogy. That's just an hour-long episode that takes 3 episodes from the digital series and puts them into 1 episode. It's also just an episode that's not on Netflix, and that's the easiest place to watch this series, so yeah. With that, I think we're prepped and ready, but first, shout out to the channel members for supporting me directly. It's very much appreciated. If you want your name up here along with a bunch of other perks, you can become a member today. A link will be in the description for mobile users. And with that, I think we're finally Give me 1 second. What are you doing here? You saw the timestamps and just skipped the intro? I say some important shit back there. Go back and watch it. I'm sorry, guys. I just caught someone skipping the line. Anyways, without any further delay, this is ranking every single episode of 2 Sentence Horror Stories from worst to best. Enjoy. You know, I don't think any subject matter is truly off limits. I just think certain subjects need a little more care and attention dedicated to them if you decide to make a story about them. You know, you need to be delicate. Something this episode is most definitely not. Because Bagman is an episode that covers the very serious and heavy subject matter of school shootings with the grace of a fucking bowling ball. Yeah, get ready, because this is a running through line throughout the entire show. 2 Cents Horror Stories loves to tackle heavy subject matters that they're not really equipped to tackle. Case in point, this episode, whether it was intentional or not, has some really weird messaging. The most incompetent character in this entire episode is the only adult character and authority figure in this story, that being the principal. Despite heavily monitoring these students in detention via these security cameras, he's constantly missing the main threat and is useless to save these kids. In fact, he puts them into harm's way more than anyone else. And it just rubs me the wrong way. For the sake of argument, you can say his actions, or lack of actions, are symbolic for how certain red flags can be overlooked, leading to such tragic events in the first place. And I would still say that's gross. It's indirectly pinning the blame on teachers and faculty here. And once again, whether or not it's intentional is besides the point, because that is a way you can read this episode. The whole thing just ends up feeling rather distasteful, which, you know, is bound to happen if you're not thoughtful. But all of that aside, it's still a bad episode. Plain and simple, it's just The Breakfast Club, but shorter and worse. I mean, you got the jock, the popular girl, the nerd, the outcast, somewhat scene chick, and the edgy burnout character, whose name is fucking Bender. You know, the same name of the same character archetype from the Breakfast Club movie. It's so on the nose that I thought this was like one big homage to that movie, but to what end? It's not subverting anything, it's not satire, it's significantly more than just a wink and a nudge. And guess what? It doesn't work! These characters have no chemistry. Their dialogue is the most "how do you do, fellow kids" ass dialogue out there. Breakfast Club worked because the chemistry worked, but here, we get this big emotional scene at the end and it just doesn't land. It was never gonna land. So what we end up with is a very distasteful episode whose implications are nothing short of gross, and characters that just really don't work, which is a problem when this is a character-driven episode. My only positive is that there's a couple of cool shots here and there, and the Bagman himself is pretty freaky, but that's kind of it. I'm kind of surprised a lot of reviews for this episode are on the more positive side, because for me, I just couldn't get behind it. I feel a little bad placing this one so low because Season 1 really is at a disadvantage compared to the 2 other seasons. While this show was collectively low budget, Season 1 definitely had the least amount of money, and it's the most apparent in this episode. Framing and lighting is just a little bit off. The editing and pacing is just weird. And the sound design? Oh my god. This sound design is god awful. Certain hits have no impact whatsoever. Once again, proving my long-held belief that sound design is one of the most important parts of filmmaking. If it's done well, you really don't notice it at all, but if it's done poorly, man, does it just really take you out of the story. And as far as that story is concerned, it's a little lackluster and somewhat predictable. It's a story about a wife and a mother-in-law dealing with the passing of this man, the wife's husband and the mother-in-law's son. And when I say dealing with, I quite literally mean dealing with. We're straight up scrapping with a ghost in this episode. The main disconnect throughout this episode is that this man was an abusive husband, something the mother-in-law deep down inside knows, but still denies. Thus, we get two interpretations of this ghost. The wife is being haunted from beyond the grave, while the mother-in-law envisions the ghost as the sweet little child he used to be. This is actually a twist, that this kid that's been running around the house this entire episode is actually a ghost. I kinda saw it coming, to be honest. I mean, if Sixth Sense has taught us anything, it's that we gotta see people directly acknowledge or interact with these characters. If you don't see that, then good chances are that they're a ghost. I do like the revelation that realistically this man was a mix of the two. It's a more nuanced perspective, and this ending as a whole really does land for me emotionally. Once again, it really is just those season 1 low budget woes that really take me out of the episode. I also think that despite having a 20-minute runtime, it's a bit drawn out. I know it's really trying to revel in this gloomy, almost miserable sort of atmosphere, but to me, it never truly achieved it in the first place. Maybe if this was a season 2 or 3 episode where they had a little bit more budget to throw around, this one would have ranked higher, but for right now, it's unfortunately second to last. If it wasn't apparent, this show really doesn't know how to write teenagers. So of course an episode centered around a group of teenage boys would be all the way down here close to the bottom. I mean, I'm a bit hard pressed to call these characters teenage boys, when they look closer in age to putting down a down payment on a new house than hopping on Fortnite with the boys and caring about their Snapchat streaks. Listen, I understand why they hire adult actors to play teenagers, those pesky child labor laws get in the way, but I'm just saying it's a fun thing to point out no matter what you're watching. At least the main character in this story does look his age. Some of the others, not so much. So yeah, the main complaint here is that these characters just don't feel, sound, or act like teenagers. But perhaps the bigger problem is the episode's direction. Frankly, they had a very horrifying grounded story here, but it just gets all fantastical. It's about a group of friends that go on one big camping trip before they all part ways for college. Pranks and shenanigans are about, and it's all fun and games until one of these guys accidentally dies. So, now they're in the woods, it's nighttime, and they have a dead body on their hands. Mind you, I'm 15, living in the double wide. Shout out to the people that get that one. But it's a great moral quandary because our main character is heading off to Yale very soon. So it's enthralling watching him decide on what to do. Meanwhile, all of his friends are freaking out and grappling with the same decisions too. But then, one by one, these characters are picked off because of some reanimated corpse shenanigans. Zombies, basically. These boys are turning into zombies. It's a thing that works for the theme of the episode, but I feel like it actually is a detriment to the overall story itself. Once again, the more grounded angle of a bunch of teen boys in the woods deciding what to do with a dead body, to me, is much more interesting than any of this stuff. At the same time, everyone turning into zombies is symbolic for how friends can drag you down to their level, so you never reach your full potential at a young age, all because you wanted to fit in. I mean, this is what the final argument between these two is all about right here. The show has no sense of subtlety. And I do like that theme, but at the same time, you could have said the exact same thing with the more grounded version of the story, too. Also, the zombie stuff in general, to me, just comes across as a bit too goofy. In the end, there is something here I would love to see explored a little bit more. The concept behind this one, a serial killer vlogger, admittedly has some chops to be a fun time. I really just wish they committed to this format a little bit better, or really at all. I mean, a snuff film through the guise of a YouTube video sounds like a good idea, if done right.
Hey, what's up YouTube? It's your boy, Artie. In today's video, we're gonna be unaliving our next door neighbor.
The main character herself actually has that vlogger infliction down pretty well. It's more so just the editing and presentation style that doesn't really feel like a vlog, nor do they really commit to that style. I mean, most of the episode is shown through security camera footage, and outside of that ending and beginning, we don't get much of this vlog presentation style. However, there is a fun subversion here though. The first half of the episode, we believe our main character is the victim of a home invasion, but then it's revealed that she herself is actually a killer, and this home intruder is in fact the victim all along. And if you want to get super technical, there's actually another twist at the very end, when it's revealed that this dead body in her house was actually a decoy. It's her boyfriend, who was alive and well the entire time. And everything was part of a plan to have a little cute couple's snuff film. And like, look, I'm not gonna defend murder, but like, that's a power couple right there. Overall, I think they just needed to lean into this whole vlogger format significantly harder to not only make this feel more authentic, but also just have more fun with it. Like, what's the point of this presentation format if you're not even gonna commit to it a little bit? I also find it hilarious that this is like a dark web vlog. If there's anything these horror writers continuously get wrong, it's the dark web. I mean, the shining example is the second Unfriended movie. Holy shit, that movie was so bad. It would actually be really fun to cover both of those movies in a standalone video one day. You know, if you want. But in the end, this had a lot of potential to be a really fun time, and unfortunately doesn't really deliver at all on what it could have delivered. I actually watched this one twice because I thought I missed something the first time. But not only was it worse on a second viewing, but I didn't miss a damn thing. This episode just kinda ends like that. And listen, I don't need things to be spoon-fed to me. I do understand this ending, but at the same time, this through line doesn't get enough emphasis to fully land. Like, this episode is about this daughter trying to get her dad a new liver by harvesting it from this guy. And throughout the episode, this strange, mysterious black mass is following her around. This is a symbolic entity that is supposed to represent our main character's loss of humanity if she goes through with this process. So in the end, when she kills this guy on the operating table and her dad dies because it's too late, this entity completely takes over her body and it's just not needed. Once again, this show shoehorns in a supernatural element when the more grounded approach I think would have played out significantly better. However, this stuff more or less plays out in the background, so at least you can ignore it for the most part. Or at least until that ending comes around. So yeah, this episode stumbled at the finish line, but it was also stumbling the entire race. I think this is just a poorly paced episode with some clunky attempts at social commentary. It's not the focal point of the story, unlike other episodes. In fact, I think there's just one scene where the characters talk about the healthcare system, but it still feels just super clumsy. This show tends to tackle subject matters for the sake of tackling them without really having anything to say. I mean, you've already seen examples of this, and you're gonna continue to see examples of this as we move along. I also don't think that's exclusive to this show. I think it's just a CW thing. But all of that aside, this one's just kind of boring. Any attempts at suspense or tension just kind of fall flat. And the dad, who should have been the emotional core of this story, is just kind of tossed to the sidelines. He should have definitely had more emphasis on the story, especially because our main character is doing all this for him after all. Just like my first time making out with a girl, this episode is just sloppy and boring. Just not very good overall. I've seen some people online summarize this story as the racist tree episode, and yeah, this is the racist tree episode. Obviously, that's a gross oversimplification to the story, but I do find it kind of funny that you can just search up 2 Cents Horror Stories racist tree episode, and this episode, Heirloom, will pop up. And to be fair, the tree isn't racist. This lady is. She sells houses to black families and then feeds them to this sentient tree. The message in this episode is about how, unfortunately, authority figures, such as the police, will not spend as much time or resources on missing persons if they happen to be black. Which is a completely fine and poignant story to tell, but yet again, this is 2 Cents Horror Stories we're talking here. The commentary is very surface level and never goes deeper than what I have already summarized. In fact, I think this through line isn't fully enveloped into the story all too much, leaving it feel shockingly hollow. And once again, despite their missteps trying to say something profound, it's just another boring episode. Not much happens, it's not really scary, and it just feels drawn out. Really, the only saving grace is that final scene. There are some striking visuals here, and it's pretty haunting. It's like this episode forgot it was a horror story until the final minutes and decided to lock in. I'm glad it did, but it's too little, too late for me. Listen, there are plenty of good horror movies and stories exploring themes related to the black struggle, but this isn't one of them. This episode isn't egregiously bad or anything like that. In fact, I think it works a bit better when viewed through the lens of a drama, because the horror elements here aren't non-existent per se, but a bit more subdued and a little cheesy looking. Season 3 episode, by the way, so it's a little more perplexing why this looks so cheap. This episode is about a native Hawaiian woman protesting her land's redevelopment in the sake of preserving her own heritage. She puts up a good fight, but at the same time, her family is barely scraping by, and settling and selling her home would get them out of their financial ruts. It's a rough ultimatum. Don't settle for the sake of your culture, or settle for the sake of your family. But to that end, it would be much harder to instill her culture's values onto her daughter if they were to settle and move. This is what I mean when I say this works way better as a drama than as a horror piece. Don't get me wrong, seeing strangers in your house with your daughter is a horrific visual, but maybe just not that interesting. Even with all the praise I have for the drama in this episode, it still comes across as a bit melodramatic and one note at certain points. Also, this is just a very visually boring episode. Everything is so brightly lit, and the sets are all neat and tidy. Perhaps with a more oppressive, gloomy atmosphere, this story would have been more impactful. I understand these clean visuals are supposed to juxtapose the horrors in the story, but it just didn't work for me personally. And I think that can summarize the entire episode for me. I can understand and appreciate what this episode is trying to do in concept, but in execution, it just didn't work for me. This episode has some very similar commentary to the episode Heirloom, but this time within regards to the healthcare system, with how unfortunately, black patients tend to be deprioritized amongst some nurses and doctors. It's actually more effective this time around because, unlike in Heirloom, the commentary here is actually persistent throughout the entire episode. Unfortunately, no racist tree though. But we do get this leech paralysis monster in this episode that looks pretty good. I will say, despite the lower budget and this show really not doing a whole lot of monsters, when they do have a monster in an episode, the effects look really good. You know, they do a good job keeping this design in the dark or low light settings to really sell this effect. But once again, like in Heirloom, not much happens in this episode until the final minutes, making it yet again be too little, too late. I understand that you gotta make these characters feel like real people. You gotta set the stage and the stakes, and you really gotta work to make this ending land properly, but it's a whole lot of nothing. I think it's mainly because I didn't buy the sisters' dynamic all too much. They just don't sound or really even act like sisters. I don't think that's really on the actresses. I think it's more so on the dialogue just feeling rather stilted. In fact, a lot of dialogue in this episode is just dumping exposition onto the audience in a rather inorganic way. Personally, I think there's just a lot of things getting in the way that prevent me from fully investing into this story. I love a good, simple story. If done well, its simplicity will aid in the overall enjoyment. If done poorly, it will come across as a little brain dead. Wanna take a guess at which route this episode took?
Oh, so this is a good episode?
No, we're at rank 20, my guy. This episode revolves around a reenactment group reenacting how indigenous people and settlers came together in harmony. But then they all get possessed by the ghosts of the actual settlers, and needless to say, things get a little bloody. I think it goes without saying given this series' track record, but this episode is really on the nose with its commentary, even for this show's sake. I mean, at the very end, they get up on their soapbox and start preaching to the audience, which just feels like lazy writing because I don't think anyone is struggling to understand what this episode was trying to say here beforehand. It's not having enough faith in the audience. And once again, what this episode is saying is rather surface level, but other than all that, it's pretty fun when it decides to have fun. One of the bigger detriments in this episode, and ultimately what I think is holding it back, is that we don't spend enough time in this carnage. It kind of just plays out in the background until the very end. It's just a bit of a missed opportunity to have a super simple and fun episode. But that's all I had to really say about this one. I don't really have too much to say about this one, so I'll keep it short. This episode is about an Asian man who has to sacrifice his heritage in order to work at some job, all while he's being hunted by his ancestor for seemingly betraying his values. Pretty on-the-nose commentary here. I don't feel like I have to explain it because you guys are all adults. Or actually, according to my analytics, 3% of you are 13 to 17 years old, but the rest of you are all adults. But this whole episode is just so slow and a little boring. Once again, nothing really happens until the final minutes. The whole thing just comes across as a little repetitive, and the escalation is such a slow crawl. There are some emotional beats with this guy's dementia-ridden mother that really are effective for me, but really, that's kinda it. I got nothing else to say about this one. Gentlemen is the episode that kicks off this series, and oh boy, it is a rough start. At least I can say I wasn't blindsided by the overall lack of quality in this show if this was their first step forward. Now, with this being a Season 1 episode, unfortunately, all those Season 1 gripes I talked about previously do plague this episode, so I'm not going to list all those out again, just keep that in mind moving forward. It's a detractor, for sure. But the story overall is just very strange. We follow a single mother trying to get back into the dating game. Unbeknownst to her, her man that she is currently seeing is actually a serial killer who specifically seeks out single mothers for his victims. It's a totally fine premise, but this serial killer never gets fleshed out. His motives are always a bit unclear. Like, he's a nurse and he's targeting these single mothers because he believes they're unequipped to raise a child. But why? His reasonings for what makes a mother ill-equipped is seemingly benign. Like, he specifically targets our main character because she works too much, which is really out of her control if she's trying to provide for her baby. And I thought that maybe these strange asinine reasons were going to be explained in some sort of backstory segment, but no. And I legitimately don't know what this episode is trying to say. Like, okay. It's going off of the whole nice guy sort of overprotective archetype. You know, this man is nice and cunning, but there is that clingy inner turmoil there beneath the surface. But to what end? Listen, I know I'm dumb, but I don't even think this episode knows what it's trying to say. Further exemplified by that ending, where it turns out that our main character doesn't actually have a baby, and instead had a miscarriage that's preserved in a doll that she treats like an actual baby. They flipped the narrative by making her the insane one, which just feels a little distasteful to people who have had miscarriages, you know? I mean, this maybe probably could have worked if there's a bit more nuance and focus dedicated to this story beat, but like, it's used as a shocking last-minute twist. Nuance was never on the table here. But if there's any silver lining, it's that the suspense and tension throughout this episode is actually really good. It may be a confusing mess on what this episode is actually trying to say, but as a suspenseful thriller type of episode, it actually does that pretty damn well, all things considered. Teeth banks so hard on its twist ending that it kind of squanders its opportunity to have fun with its actual premise. This is a vampire versus werewolf episode where we hardly get to see vampires fighting werewolves. I mean, you're better off watching the Twilight series if you want some of that action.
Ugh, but then you actually had to watch Twilight.
Yo, are we still dunking on Twilight in 2025?
Not really. That baseball scene goes hard as fuck.
You see, this couple goes into town and encounters these seemingly homophobic people, and it seems like they're attacking these people because they're gay, when in actuality, they're werewolves, and our main character's girlfriend is secretly a vampire. I mean, maybe these guys were werewolves and also homophobic? One doesn't necessarily negate the other. But this is the big twist of the episode, and we don't get to see any of the action because our main character is knocked out by her girlfriend right when everything is going down. At least we get to see a werewolf decapitation, but that's really it. We see the aftermath more than anything else. It kinda sucks that this episode spent the entire time building up to this part, and yet we're just completely blue-balled in the end. The crux of this episode is actually all this relationship drama stuff, which is fine, if not a little melodramatic at times. But why not really punctuate this revelation by having a really fun action scene to close off the episode? Yeah, it might offset the more grounded emotional stuff, but I would argue that it would really emphasize how crazy this twist is, along with just being a really fun time. The focus just seems to be a little bit misguided, at least for my own personal tastes. This episode has one of the biggest missed opportunities within regards to its central concept. It was genuinely baffling because all the pieces were there. The vision was so clear, and yet it ends up being rather generic. This episode follows a trans youth navigating high school while being trans, and this opening sequence just hits so hard, and perhaps a bit too real for my trans fans out there. And yeah, it's a bit on the nose, but it's rather tastefully done for the most part, which is a little surprising considering how ungraceful the show has been with other topics. But our main character gets an ocarina that has the power to make others feel how he feels, which is a fantastic plot device. Bullies oftentimes don't know the extent of damage they inflict onto others, so having something to showcase their harm is not only brilliant, but I think perfectly aligns with the story being about the trans experience. The only problem being, this ocarina only inflicts physical pain. It emits a sound so loud, it hurts people's ears, or even twists and breaks their bones, and okay. You could argue that this is what our main character feels. Physical pain from all the harassment. But I would argue this is kind of a basic answer to the scenario at hand. Like, the first time our main character uses this ocarina is on these girls bullying him in the bathroom, and it's like, come on, the setup is right there. There's mirrors all over this bathroom. Slap these girls with a massive dose of body dysmorphia. Not only could it be a more surreal horror moment, but it could also make these girls come to genuinely understand what our main character is going through, and thus gaining an earnest form of sympathy instead of laying off because of fear and pain. I also feel like this has the adverse effect of losing the trans storyline. After the intro and some parts here and there, it kinda just evolves into a basic story about bullying. Once again, I think this feeds into the larger problem with this show, just tackling certain subject matters for the sake of tackling them while not really saying much. The ocarina was the perfect device to keep this storyline alive, but it just didn't. Quick side note, if it wasn't obvious from my music choices in the videos, I grew up playing Ocarina of Time, and as a kid, I always wanted to learn and play the ocarina in real life, but I just never did.
Does this story have a point to it at all?
No, not really. These videos are so long, sometimes I just want to share little pieces of information about myself. In the end, it's rather lackluster for me. It could have been one of the better episodes in this series if they just realized what they truly had on their hands here and capitalized on it. If there's one thing I dislike as much as bad episodes, it's episodes that are decent, but with missed opportunities. And man, does this episode have one of the biggest missed opportunities. Season 1 episode, so once again, you know the deal. Although I will say that the editing in this particular one seems to be the most jarring out of all the Season 1 episodes. Certain emotional beats have a hard time resonating because certain scenes weren't given enough room to breathe. Whether that was because the scene cut too fast or certain events or revelations moved too fast to be properly absorbed. It led to some slight confusion at moments, but nothing that couldn't be corrected over time. But continuing the trend of tackling heavy subject matters, this episode is centered around sexual assault in the workplace, and more specifically, rape.
Yo, why are we censoring that word?
Yeah. YouTube doesn't like those kind of words, and I much rather censor those words than trivialize it by saying something stupid like grape. But surprisingly, they actually handle this story rather delicately. It's played super straight and serious. It doesn't make light of the situation at hand, nor is it exploitative of what it decides to show. I mean, the scene where she's in the hospital after being administered a rape kit is so gut-wrenching and hard to watch. But that scene works so well because it's played hauntingly straight. And that's kind of how I describe this entire episode. The horror really comes from how unflinchingly real everything is portrayed. I mean, yes, this episode has plenty of body horror moments, but I wouldn't say that they stand out nearly as much as these more real moments. What really brings this episode down is, unfortunately, all those Season 1 hangups. Once again, the pacing in this episode is just super strange and jarring. It sucks too, because I think this is the first episode that is pretty good story-wise, but is brought down by all the other factors. It's common throughout media for zombies to represent such things as consumerism, loss of identity, capitalism and class, and so on and so on. Now we have an episode that revolves around a zombie outbreak taking place in an Amazon warehouse. Gee, I wonder what they're trying to say in this episode. Yeah, I mean, subtlety was never the show's strong suit, but I don't really mind it here. Listen, they can get on their soapbox here and there, but zombies throughout countless portrayals were always pretty on the nose with its message. I don't think anyone watching Dawn of the Dead was left scratching their head wondering what George A. Romero meant by this. You know what I mean? And while this episode is on the more fun side of things, I can't help but to feel it seems a little lackluster. I mean, the zombies themselves, they didn't even try. No prosthetics, no makeup, no bitches. And the action that is presented throughout the episode is just alright. I think they could have gotten a lot more mileage with a setting such as a warehouse, but what do I know? But yeah, that's kind of it. Simple and to the point with this one. This one goes a bit overboard at times, but still manages to stick the landing. This one couldn't be more straightforward if it tried. It's an episode about gay conversion therapy. This gay guy goes to this place after a cancer diagnosis where he is both physically and mentally tortured, all in a way to help cure him from his disease. And then he comes out straight as an arrow, looking like he's in the fucking Young Republicans Club and everything. Everything in this episode works pretty well. It's a good psychological horror episode, but I just think the satanic cult stuff near the end is a bit overkill. It is built up rather well, but in execution, it feels like putting a hat on a hat, and these special effects are pretty rough. If you couldn't already tell, it's a Season 1 episode. Overall, I think it's just a rather solid episode with a couple of shortcomings that I can look past, but even then, it's not doing me any favors. I don't have too much to say about this one. It's just a really solid time. It's about an old lady that thinks her grandson is possessed by an evil spirit, and that's because, well, he is. It's actually a fun little flip of the script halfway through the episode. In the first half of the episode, we are led to believe that this grandma is just fucking crazy, and this is just a normal ass kid. So we're very much on Team Kid in the first half. Then in the second half, it's revealed that this kid is actually possessed, and the grandma was right all along. And that's when we switch back to Team Grandma, but it might be a little too late at that point. But that's kind of it. I mean, this episode's got some great atmosphere and some creepy visuals, but overall, it's just rather solid. Nothing to complain about, but nothing to really praise either. It's a Season 1 episode with all those Season 1 pitfalls probably holding it back from being higher on the list, but even then, if it wasn't a Season 1 episode, I don't think it would have gotten much higher. I think we finally arrived to completely average episodes. That's right, this episode doesn't do anything poorly, but it also doesn't do anything particularly well either. It's a complete middle-of-the-road episode that actually acts as a pretty good baseline for the series. This episode is about a brother and sister, where the brother fears that her sister is possessed by a demon, and she is. But in actuality, this whole episode is one big metaphor for addiction. And it actually kind of nails it as a metaphor. This sister isn't a demon, she's just hooked on that smack. But addiction is oftentimes described as fighting demons, or people turn towards certain things because they are fighting demons. It's not the most mind-blowing metaphor out there, but it's effective. And the brother is trying to help his sister through his faith in Christ. Once again, just a really good metaphor. It's really not much, but for this series, it's fucking special. Everything else about this episode is fine. It's honestly nothing to write home about. There's some pretty good special effects here, but I don't know what else to talk about. Completely average episodes are probably the hardest episodes for me to talk about because there's really nothing for me to add. Honestly, it would just result into me devolving into recapping the episode and occasionally saying how okay it is. And that's not really fun to watch or talk about, even if I throw in a couple jokes here and there. So yeah, overall, it's a solid time, which for the show is honestly a blessing. I think my first impression of this episode wasn't the best. Everything that initially turned me off actually ended up being all the stuff I really enjoyed. I just thought everything was a bit too over the top and wacky. I mean, from the set design to the two old lady twin sisters, it was just a bit overbearing. But over the course of this episode, it kind of dawned on me that this is just how this episode's style is, and you know what? They used this kind of style to great effect in the final act. That overbearing style almost smothers you amidst all the chaos at the end. I felt completely claustrophobic. But despite all that, there's still an emotional core to this episode that manages to resonate with me. It's really impressive that this episode can be so wacky, and yet still manage to nail this tonal shift and actually feel for these two characters. Because before this emotional moment, it really is just these two old hags just tormenting each other in various different ways. Which is perhaps my biggest gripe with the episode. While a granny versus granny prank war is fun to watch, it's not particularly scary. I'm kind of realizing that this complaint can be applied to a lot of episodes in this series. Even in the end, when they turn on this one guy and murder him, it's not scary, no matter how gruesome his death is, mainly because the dude had it coming. You know, he was a prick trying to extort these old ladies out of money. Also, if you get killed by two old ladies, that's kinda on you, man. Couldn't be me. So a fun watch with a great style, but just not very scary. Okay, let me be honest. I know this episode isn't held in the highest of regards, and kind of rightfully so. This episode has some absolutely cheesy effects. These demon face morphs that appear on screen for like half a second are so bad. It's like that old Damebo video, but somehow looks worse. I have made that reference before in another video. Guess it's just a go-to reference point for me. And this is a season 1 episode, so some aspects don't have the proper impact needed to truly land, right? I can recognize all these aspects, but I don't really care because this episode is just fun. It's about a small group of kids training so they could run away from demons in case they ever encounter one, which, in this episode, demons are shapeshifters that can appear as a myriad of different people. Really puts the emphasis on stranger danger. But I'm a big sucker for a group of kids going up against a bunch of monsters. I mean, Monster Squad is one of my all-time favorite Halloween movies.
Wolfman's got nards!
It's not gonna blow anyone's mind. In fact, it's a little by the numbers at moments. The ending has the whole classic doppelganger, which one's the real one sort of trope. But there is fun to be had. And the friends dynamic is just nice and wholesome, which does manage to tug at my heartstrings just a little bit. It's cheesy at times. There's a lot of season 1 hangups, and it's kinda by the numbers, but it's still a fun time for me regardless. This one's probably high up on everyone's list because it is one of the more emotional stories in this show's catalog, while also just having some of the most dreary, haunting, and downright spooky atmosphere in the entire series. I mean, I think that just happens naturally when you decide to place your episode inside of a morgue. It's cold and sterile, and the long dark corridors really invoke a great sense of dread. So the atmosphere is off the charts here, but it's that emotional core that really makes this episode stand out. You see, this mother brings her daughter to work, and the daughter encounters all this spooky stuff in which this other mortician is constantly saving her life. I thought it was rather obvious that this mortician was a ghost, and I thought this was going to be the episode's big twist, and well, he is a ghost, but so is the little girl. The mortician stays behind to help other lost souls move on, and he's finally there to help our main character move on and help make peace with her own mother, and fuck, dude. Yeah, it got my ass. I think even if you saw this twist coming in its entirety, I think this final scene is so emotional, it doesn't matter. So while the first half of this episode is dead set on scaring you, the second half just fucking punches you in the gut. I will say, it's just a tad bit sappy. I think this final scene just goes on for a bit too long to the point where it feels ever so slightly redundant, but I can excuse it because I think the core of this scene is still very much intact. Overall, a bit rough around the edges, but still beautiful nonetheless. Viewers know at this point that I'm a big fan of body horror, so of course the quintessential body horror episode in the series ranks so highly, but to say that body horror is the only thing going for this episode would be massively underselling it. Listen, I've been shitting on this series almost the entire time, but I gotta give credit where credit is due. The episode's message on beauty standards and classism is actually pretty well integrated into the actual story. It doesn't feel disjointed like in other episodes. It's almost like they had an actual vision and decided to capitalize on it. Once again, let's be honest, this is very standard stuff, but for this show, it's amazing. I think one of the biggest faults in this episode is the mystery component. Look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's truly going on here. The central revelation was so obvious, I thought they were going to subvert it in some way, shape, or form, but they didn't. This wouldn't be too big of a problem if they just de-emphasized the build-up to this episode a little bit. You know, keep all the tension and suspense so that makes this final act really land emotionally, but we don't need all this, oh man, what's really going on type of stuff. But hey, all that can honestly be forgiven because, once again, all this body horror stuff is great. It's amazing how effective this show can be in this regard, despite their low budget. They had some real talented makeup artists working on this show. I just kind of wish there were more episodes like this. Overall, it's a good episode with some of the best body horror in this series. This one's actually a pretty good little psychological thriller. It's about a woman who is hired to paint this guy's wall, but her paranoia leads her to start believing that he killed his wife and she is next. From the jump, we see how crippling her paranoia can be, so every new piece of evidence she finds that could possibly insinuate this man in murdering his wife, we the audience have to figure out whether or not it's actually a reliable piece of evidence, or if it's just her paranoia getting the better of her. I think it puts the episode in a bit of a vicarious position, because in the end, either the man did kill his wife, or he didn't, which are both equally predictable, because if he didn't kill his wife, that really plays into the whole paranoia thing. You know, perhaps she takes precautionary measures and ends up killing an innocent man, an ironic twist. Or maybe he did kill his wife, which is ironic in the other degree. You know? She spends all episode trying to conquer her paranoia, but then it turns out that she actually was right all along. And for the record, that is the ending of this episode. This man did in fact kill his wife. It just sucks that either of these scenarios are predictable. But I guess with the premise at hand, there really couldn't be any other outcome. That being said, despite being predictable, it didn't really diminish the episode for me. In fact, I respect the episode for sticking to their guns and ending on this kind of note, instead of trying to shoehorn in some bullshit ending that doesn't really make sense just for the sake of having a shocking twist ending. I'm looking at you, Dead Time Stories. Legit, almost every single episode in that series ended in some bullshit twist ending that didn't even make sense. I also talk about it a lot throughout that ranking video if you want to check it out. Overall, a good episode that will have you on the edge of your seat the entire time. Even if you can see that ending coming from a mile away, the journey is still great. First off, this episode's title is just so much fun to say. Patel Motel Cartel. Say that 5 times fast. I bet you can't. And second off, this episode is like an episode of Haunting Hour or Goosebumps. And I mean that in the best way possible. I think it leans more towards the Goosebumps side, story-wise, with how goofy the episode can get, especially with the little ending revelation. But the visual tone definitely shares an identity with The Haunting Hour. Truly, if this episode had more suitable language for children, it could have passed as an episode for either one of those series. And yet again, I mean that in the best way possible. This episode is about a kid going through puberty, which looks a little bit different for him because, as it turns out, his whole family are aliens. The family motel is actually a place for aliens to stay while they transition into Earth life. It's why his dad was so adamant at the start about needing an adult to check people into the motel and why he couldn't do it himself. And it's why everything blows up in his face when he decides to check in a person by himself, and that person turns out to be an evil alien trying to siphon energy from his family because they have strong alien DNA or whatever. So not only is it a funny, goofy episode that kind of harkens back to the type of shows or books that I read as a kid, but it also works as a great metaphor for puberty. Admittedly, it really doesn't have the most emphasis placed onto it outside of the beginning, but I'll still count it. I know I've accumulated most of my fans from ranking children's horror shows such as Creeped Out or The Haunting Hour, so if there's any episode I would specifically recommend to my fan base, it would have to be this one right here. Creepy dolls, one of the most tried and true traditions within the horror genre. They've never really been my cup of tea, just never found dolls too creepy or threatening for that matter, which is why I'm surprised that this episode ended up so high on this list. But I think that's a testament to the overall quality of this episode. This one's about a girl who turns her babysitters into dolls, something the parents are actually aware of but are powerless to do anything or else they'll meet a similar fate. It's played as this big twist revelation, but like, the writing was on the wall. Actually, the episode tries to spin this revelation into 2 twists. The first time, when it's revealed that the girl's collection of dolls actually used to be human. And then again later on when our main character finds a bunch of student IDs, revealing that all her dolls were all once her previous babysitters. This really wasn't needed. I like the ID card stuff. Putting a name and a face does a good job at humanizing these victims, which actually pays off in the end. But just the amount of emphasis placed on both these revelations seems a bit like overkill. Ideally, having both revelations be revealed in one scene would have been perfect, but honestly, I'm kind of just nitpicking at this point. But that's what I tend to do when I don't have too many problems with an episode. Much like the last entry, this feels like a Haunting Hour episode in the best way possible. I mean, the dolls turning on the little girl at the end, and then the doll version of the little girl showing up at the main character's place of work is the quintessential R.L. Stine-ass ending for this episode. It is so cheesy, but I love it so much. I really don't have too many negatives to say about this episode other than there's a bit too much buildup for such an obvious twist. But even then, it doesn't mess up the pacing too much. Overall, just a really fun and good episode. Hyde is a season 1 episode that somehow defined the odds and ranked this highly because it's just a really simple and good episode about a home invasion. It's horrific, it's suspenseful, and riddled with tension. There's moments here that will make you hold onto your breath. And I think the social commentary this time around is actually pretty good. And by pretty good, I mean it actually properly communicates what it wants to say and does it in a simple yet effective manner. I think its effectiveness is due to the fact that this episode doesn't go on and on about its message. They're not patting themselves on the back with this one, unlike other episodes. They simply set some things up at the start, have some things play out in the background that you can interpret for yourselves, and then stick the landing when they reveal the true villains of the story, which is Ice. Which, that can't be Ice. They're not covering up their faces. Oh, hit me! Oh, shit. That's all they had to do. Just let's interpret things for ourselves. We're not dumb.
Are you sure about that?
For the most part, we're not dumb. And for a season 1 episode, this one actually doesn't have any of those season 1 hangups. Framing and lighting is good, editing is good, and sound design is actually pretty good too. I think this one just genuinely shocked me for a season 1 episode. Once again, sometimes the simpler a plot is, the better. And I think this episode is proof of that. Nature versus technology isn't a new thing by any means. In fact, this isn't really a groundbreaking story by any means. A man obsessed with technology is gifted a plant by his boyfriend that slowly takes over his life in horrific ways. Essentially, this story could be summed up as man forced to finally touch grass. But if there's one thing I like to say around this channel is that sometimes episodes thrive when it's just simply simple. Our main character fights this plant as it slowly takes over his house and even his body, leading to what I think is some of the best body horror in the entire series next to Essence. I mean, our main character's ultimate fate is so horrifying and gross. It's perfect. I don't know how much I can show given the YouTube guidelines, but it's pretty gnarly. But simple is as simple does. This episode is equal parts fun and horrifying. It's a little slow at the start, but once it gets going, it really gets going. Homecoming is the last episode of this entire series, and rather surprisingly, this show not only goes out on a good note, but the best note possible. It's an episode about a family reconnecting because their dad is close to death's door. Our main character's hang-up about this situation is that when he was a child, his dad was abusive towards him. Something nobody else in the family seems to believe because of their own perceived perspective. You see, our main character is pretty significantly younger than his older brothers. So when he tells tales of his dad hitting him when he was a kid, his brothers don't buy it because that doesn't seem like the man that raised them. It really puts into perspective the different perceptions we can have on parental figures when being raised in different stages of their life. The dad is a famous author with lots of money, but that fame didn't come right until the older brothers moved away for college. So from their perspective, they call their younger brother a liar and ungrateful because from their perspective, he didn't have to grow up poor the way they did. It's a really nuanced thing for this show to talk about. And they do it well. They really cover all aspects of this subject matter in a somewhat realistic way. Of course, this is a horror show, so there's a monster involved here that our main character says is what he saw repeatedly growing up. It's symbolic of the abuse he suffered from his own father. And I think deep down inside, the older brothers, despite not believing their younger brother, they knew he was telling the truth. It just takes a bit longer for them to fully accept this notion because that wasn't the man that raised them personally. That wasn't the man that got them through college, and so on and so on. But once they finally encounter the monster for themselves, they have to finally accept this as fact. And it's followed by this really good heart-to-heart scene. Also, these monster effects and this monster design is just really cool. It's scary and intimidating, constantly bathed in shadows to make it all the more spooky. I can't say enough good things about this episode. To me, it truly is a diamond in the rough, and I'm happy that this show was at least able to go out on such a good note. So that was 2-sentence horror stories, and man, that was pretty rough. I don't like to get too negative on this channel, and hopefully I wasn't that bad throughout this video, but this series just wasn't for me. If you enjoyed it, then hey, more power to you, brother. Anyways, we've covered a lot of shows on this channel, but we have somehow neglected the medium of animation so far. So the next ranking video will be on a cartoon series. And not just any cartoon series, but one of the most requested shows for me to do a ranking video on in my channel's history. So I guess that's what we'll be ranking next time. Well, I'll see you guys then.
Oh, and hey, happy Halloween, everyone.